Have you ever stopped to think about the fans behind a band? What is it about the music that keeps fans coming back for more? Or is there more? My name is Renae Lipsmeyer, and I am the host of this podcast, The Space Between Podcast, the podcast where we talk about the fans of the Dave Matthews Band. Each week, a fellow DMB fan joins the show to discuss their journey with the band. Welcome to the Space Between Podcast. Hey guys, welcome to the Space Between Podcast. My name is Renae Lipsmeyer. If this is your very first time to either listen or watch the Space Between Podcast, I have a very interesting episode ahead for you. Now, if this is your very first time, this is going to be a little bit different. So don't listen to this episode and think, oh my God, this was the most boring podcast, because actually what's going to happen in this episode is very exciting, but probably more exciting for those of you that have been listening or have a history with the show. But don't worry, if you've never heard of me before, if you've never heard of this show before, hey, if you've never heard of the music that I'm going to talk about, that's okay. I have an exciting story for you today. So I have to take you back just a little bit, just for if you're a first-time listener, I want to give you just a brief history of this podcast. So I started this podcast in November of 2022. So think back, where were you November 2022? A lot of us were still like kind of in that COVID situation, right? We were a little leery of parties and people. I mean, it was just still a buzz in the air, even though concerts were going on, because, you know, if you can see behind me on the YouTube channel, one of my favorite posters that I have is when we finally got to go back to see live music. And I got to be at the first show of 2021, which was July 23rd, 2021 in Raleigh, North Carolina. That will forever be one of my favorite posters. I believe it's a James Flame who is the artist. I got a couple of his posters. Live music, having it back, that was an amazing time. But if you think back, that was still such a crazy time. And in my life as a nurse, I've been a nurse for 15 years in the state of Arkansas. You know, it all got to me. And so late 2022, I had what I like to call, because I don't know how else to explain the feelings that I had, because feelings are a very hard thing to articulate to someone, because it is something that we feel. It's not something that we can put into words. And sometimes those feelings are because of other things, or because, you know, sometimes people can't, even if you could put words to them, they can't understand because they haven't been in your exact shoes. And so late November 2022, I found myself in what I call my first mental health crisis. Thankfully, I got some help, talked to the right people, and they told me that I needed to find a creative outlet, something that beyond my family and friends, something that would make me happy. And there wasn't a whole lot of things that I could name. The very first thing that I named was the music of the Dave Matthews Band, the family, the friends, the fans of the Dave Matthews Band. Like that, I could do that all day long. I could talk about that all day long. Well, what do you do with that? Like, how is that going to help me, right? Like that, I mean, that sounds like, oh, if I could just win the lottery, that's going to make all my problems better. I might as well have just said that, because the likelihood of me just, hey, I'm going to talk about the fans of the Dave Matthews Band or the Dave Matthews Band. I'm going to talk about that to fill my time with. That sounds like a crazy thing to say. At least it did for me, because I have zero experience doing anything like this. Like I said, I've been a nurse for 15 years, and while I work on a computer daily, I mean, it is 2025 now. Of course, most of us are very savvy with the computers, but being a podcaster was not something I knew. All of the mics and, you know, the hardware, the setup that I had to have. Thank God I have teenagers. I have 4 children. My youngest one is just about to turn 13. So it's a very busy house here. But after I had those thoughts in November 2022, like I said, I was told to find a hobby. It just happened to be that my best friend Leah, who if you haven't met her in through the podcast, you will meet her in the future, because hold on, guys, I'm getting to the whole big announcement. I'm getting to it. You got to go through the story to understand what is happening. If I just told you what was happening, then it wouldn't make as much sense. And it's just my heart's desire for you to understand exactly where I'm going with this, because I could not be more excited, guys. I could not be more excited. And also, I'm in complete disbelief, just complete disbelief. Okay, so I had a friend, Leah, who's very important to the story. I love you, Leah. If you ever listen to this podcast, which I have to say, she's my best friend, but she does not listen to my podcast. I would say that she's heard of the Dave Matthews Band, obviously, because I'm her friend. But then also, like, she's 39, like, she's not as old as I am, but yet, like, she's heard about them. She knew that they were the band that played like Crash, or that's her level of understanding the Dave Matthews Band. So when she met me and we became friends, like, her world exploded a little bit. So she doesn't listen to my podcast, but one day she'll listen to this one, and she'll definitely she knows about what I'm going to tell you guys. So it's important to know that Leah had started a podcast. So it was just right in front of me. She had started a podcast talking about Bravo. She likes all the housewife drama TV, and I'm totally not into that. Like, I hate drama so much. Just the bickering for entertainment is not my gig, but she loves it. She loves it. And I have a lot of friends that do. And so I love it for them. So she was doing a podcast about Bravo. And so it was just right in front of me. And she was like, you could just do a podcast. All you have to be able to do is talk. And I was like, girl, I could talk forever about the world of the Dave Matthews Band, because there's just so much around it. I mean, so much around it. And so I knew that I need to focus if I'm going to talk about a niche. How do you say that? That word is always one of those words. Like, is it a niche or a niche, whatever. If you want to find that little tiny topic that maybe no one else in the world is talking about, that's kind of what you're going for. You don't want to start a murder mystery or like a true crime podcast unless you're like, deep into the subject in some way, shape, or form. But I knew I needed to really nail down my subject when we're talking about the Dave Matthews Band, because it's such a broad subject. At least to me it is. To some of you listeners, it may just be a name of a band that you heard about in the 90s, and that's okay. Again, don't worry about your knowledge of the band or the fans. You don't have to worry about anything. All you got to do is just listen to this, and when you hear the announcement at the end, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe what she's saying. This is a story inside the story of the podcast. And so here we go. It just keeps getting better. Okay, so I said, okay, I'm going to start a podcast, and I'm going to do it about the fans of the Dave Matthews Band, because by this time in my fanhood, I had traveled a little bit to see the band, which is like a whole nother thing. I saw the band first in my hometown, Rogers, Arkansas. I've got the poster and the whole deal. That was my first time to get to see them live. And simply, it was not until 2015, just because, again, I live in small town Arkansas. I had a lot of kids early, like life was busy, so I didn't get to do that. And plus I didn't have a lot of money, so that just was not, like, traveling to see a band was not something that was even in my thought process. But they came to my city, and that's when you go, oh my God, finally get to see this band that I've listened to for so long. Like, yes, on the radio, but like I had their vinyls, like I had their shit, right? And so I can remember the moment I actually like heard the Dave Matthews Band first. Like I had a history with them. So they came to Rogers, Arkansas, 2015, blah, blah, blah. So I had seen them live, which is important because in understanding the culture around the band, you almost have to travel a little bit to get it, because you're going to start seeing familiar faces. You're going to start seeing those people who go to every show or go to 30 shows, or just go to maybe like the first 5 because it's the first 5, or they go to the last 5, or just the last show, or just the first show. Like, there's so many variations of what people are doing to still see the Dave Matthews Band live, who, again, if you don't know anything about this band, that's okay, because they were just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just this last year, October 2024. So there's a lot of information about this band out there. So if you're just listening to this because, someone told you to listen to this girl talk about something, I've got some homework for you. I'm serious when we're talking about the Dave Matthews Band. There's so much history when it comes to this band. But what's even cooler, I think, personally, my favorite thing, beyond the music got us together, but it's the fans that keep us coming back for more. And yes, that's a line from The Space Between, which is a song by the Dave Matthews Band. So I start this podcast and I'm like, okay, here we go. I don't know that many people. So how a podcast works is you have to talk, right? Like, that's what it's all about, is someone's going to listen to you talk about a topic. And so I knew it didn't need to be me all of the time. I know that people really don't want to hear my voice. And I knew I wanted to talk to other people to see, like, I guess to kind of feel out, like, am I the weird one that has this obsessive passion about this band? Like, is it just me, or are other people willing to talk about it so boldly and own up in front of everyone to how much they love this band, and ideally how much this band has changed their life throughout the years? Because again, remember, the Dave Matthews Band has been a band for over 30 years, started in 1991. A lot of you guys who may listen to this were not even born then. I was 11 in 1991, so a lot of us were young. A lot of us have not found this band until much later, simply just because we're young. But then there's those fans who have been lucky enough to be there since day one. At least we all found it, and we're all doing this together. And I love that part of a Dave Matthews Band show, again, traveling, seeing the different audiences that are just all over. You have every age range at a concert. You have fans bringing their children, anything from small children with like the headgear on, families coming, but you've got your 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 60s, 70s, 80s. Every age is there, and that's what I love about this music. There's no bounds around it. There's no restrictions around it saying this is just young people's music. No, it's absolutely not. If you like a beat and a groove, and you like a jazzy edge, but you also like rock and roll, but you want to go to church and you want to listen to someone who has like literal organ skills play the keyboard, I've got a place for you. I've got a band for you. If you like the sweet sound of a trumpet just blowing your mind, or do you like the sexy, sexy tone of the saxophone? I believe that it's a saxophone because it's so damn sexy. It's sexy and it's sexy. I love it. There's no coincidence there. It's so damn sexy. And so if you imagine putting all that together with like a killer drum set, a dude that can shred the guitar. I just love Tim. Our little fawns. All of them are just so amazing. And I'm glad you're still listening, because boy, am I dragging you out. I've been talking 13 minutes, y'all. It's fixing to get good though. It's fixing to get good. So don't you hit stop. Keep watching, keep listening. Here we go. So with traveling, it did help me progress in the podcast a little bit, just kind of spreading the word, getting more people on the show. Again, you got to meet people, you got to know people to have guests on a show. And if you're just waiting for your friends to tell your friends, that can be a slow process. So you've got to be out there and you've got to talk about it, which was very hard for me, still is hard for me to this day, to market for myself. I have a lot of marketing experience, medical marketing, but I'm not marketing myself. Marketing myself has been extremely hard because there's a part of that where I don't want to feel vain or to feel like, look at me. I don't want that. And so that's like the struggle that I'm having when it comes to marketing yourself. And it's not even marketing me, it's marketing the show that I've created and that I am the host of. And so, it's weird to market yourself, but I have just been super blessed with as things have gone on to have people start marketing for me, just like, hey, I will wear your t-shirt, hey, send me some stickers so I can pass them out at the concert because I know you're not going to be there. I mean, like, people have really helped me in so many ways, and that's exactly what it's taken, is for the word to spread so more people come to the show to share their journey with the Dave Matthews Band, whether they heard about it a year ago or whether they've been a fan since day one. Everybody's journey is completely different on how they found this band, why they listen to this music, are they getting anything from it, has it helped them through anything. And so I have over 150 stories, and that count is just somewhere plus or minus, but I think on the plus side, of how many fans I've talked to in the past 2 years just telling me their history with the band. It has been, guys, it's been a ride. Going into this, I had no idea that this music, if you'll remember the beginning of this story, when I was asked, when I admitted that I didn't want to take another breath outside of my family, outside of the Lord, outside of my, children, what would make me happy? The answer was the music of the Dave Matthews Band. This music has that. So many people have that story, but like in different ways. There have been people come on my show that have gone through cancer treatments, cancer diagnosis, and then cancer treatments, the loss of a loved one. Imagine a father losing his wife, of course, not planned at all, because most deaths aren't a planned situation, and then having to tell your children that they will never see their mother again. Think about that, and how he came on the show and offered these words about how the music of the Dave Matthews Band and the community around the Dave Matthews Band had impacted him and was a tool in his healing process, through his grieving process. So many stories that I was not prepared for. There's a story of a nurse that got hit in the parking lot while she was at work on the clock, just went out to smoke a cigarette. It had her in the hospital forever. She had a traumatic brain injury. Her story's incredible because do you know what she used as a tool to get through this? She used music as a tool to get through it. The music of the Dave Matthews Band. Now, I could be saying any band, give me any group of fans, and that music could possibly do that for them. But I've chosen to focus on the fans of the Dave Matthews Band simply just because that's my favorite band. And so it was very easy to find information about them. And I also really enjoyed just gathering all of these facts and hearing all of these stories from people that were part of this music history from the very beginning, when people used to tape the concerts and then they would trade them and they would mail them to people. And there's just so much cool history that deserves to be documented about the Dave Matthews Band. But here we are. We're almost at 20 minutes, and I want to give you what you've all been waiting for right now, guys. So after a little over 2 years of doing this and having countless stories, some that have just filled my heart with laughter, some that have broken my heart when I didn't know my heart was going to be broken on a podcast, stories that filled me up with hope when I didn't even know that I needed that at that moment. And I hope this podcast has done that for you too. That to remember that we are all suffering in some way. And we are so damn lucky that we have found, if not just a small tool, a tool in our healing, and whatever that healing is, whether it's from grief or from sorrow, from loss, from death, from a set, from a mental health crisis that we didn't know we were going to have. It can all help, and it has all helped these people. And so those are the stories that I've accidentally documented. I didn't know that I was going to document all of these stories. I didn't know this was going to happen. And so it just on my heart, it was on my heart, all of these stories, time and time again, so much stories of hope and how people got through, and their strength and their courage to share their hearts with all of us so that others could use their story as a means of hope, to say, hey, I've been through that too. All of our journeys have led us together through the Dave Matthews Band. And so what am I going to do with all of these stories? I'm glad you've asked. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you've known I've said a couple of things. I think in the early days, I said I'm going to write a book. Well, here's the truth. I want to be a reader so bad. Like, I will buy books. I have books all over this room. But I will not read them. I think it's the ADHD in me. Reading's probably just out of it. I want to be a good reader. But I'm not. So I was like, writing a book would be terrible because I wouldn't want to read it. And if you're like me, you wouldn't want to read it. But what I'm really into is documentaries. If you ask my husband, like 99 times out of 100, what is Renae watching? She's watching a documentary about anything, like how did they make it, or the complete history of the Beatles, because I wasn't here when they were big and famous. My mom had to tell me a few stories, but like my mom didn't, I don't even know if she went to get to see the Beatles. I know she got to go see somebody, I don't know who it was, the Monkees, I don't know, somebody, I don't know. But I love a good documentary. There's so many amazing ones out there. And so that just got my wheels to spinning. But again, I laugh at myself because I'm a nurse. I started this podcast because of nursing, because it like literally drove me. I'm sure there's a nurse listening to this going, I understand you. I understand you, sister, and I am praying for you. Sir, if you're a nurse, I am praying for you. Hard times out there. What do I do with all of these stories? Well, I have thought about it. I have talked with many people. And you know what? Sometimes it's just in meeting the right people. I've put in the work for 2.5 years collecting these stories, and I'm not about to stop. We're still collecting stories. And so if you're watching this right now and you have never been on the show and you'd like to share your journey with about the Dave Matthews Band and how you found them and anything that's connected to that, you don't have to have any, heart stories. They can be funny stories. I literally had a guy on the show that was a butler at the Playboy Mansion. I say his story every time because it's one of the funniest stories. So I want you to know that it doesn't have to be serious. It's just your story, and your story is exciting to you. And I can promise it's exciting to thousands of other people who love to hear anything about the Dave Matthews Band. So meeting the right people, I have met someone that would like to help me produce this film. But here's what the film is going to be about. So is it going to be about me having a podcast called The Space Between Podcasts? No, it's not going to be about that at all. Is it going to be about the Dave Matthews Band? No, it's not going to be at all. Well, what's it going to be about, Renae? This is not making sense. But yet it does. So again, if you'll remember, I've been a nurse for 15 years. I've worked in many fields. One of my most my favorite is mental health. Now, I'll say as a nurse, mental health is everywhere. They come in through the ER, they end up maybe at the psych hospital. But then there's Jerry Psych, which was one of my favorites. And so psych has just been one of those things that I've held on to because it's personal to me. And the more you know, the better you can get through something. And so it's been the combination of 15 years worth of learning as a nurse, and then creating a podcast where so many people were open and honest about their mental health and how music helped them through that. And then having a producer who says, tell me more. I go on to tell him that my dream scenario for this documentary would to also have specialists or leaders in their fields, like a music therapist. That's actually a title of a person who uses music therapy to help, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever the diagnosis can be, to have those set of people on the show. I have a therapist that has already reached out that wants to be part of the show. She's in LA. She's so excited. But my overall goal in all of this is to offer whoever watches the documentary some resources so that they have someone to reach out to. I was very blessed to have a family support system when I had my mental health crisis. I was so thankful. I'm so thankful that I had someone to reach out to that I trusted and that I loved. And I understand that not everyone has that. And so it is my mission, it is my goal to provide resources for those who may need that. My goal is to find free resources, free therapy services for people that either their insurance doesn't cover that or they cannot afford, even if they can't afford their copays, which is often a problem in the healthcare world. A lot of people can't meet their deductible, so they can't go to therapy because, it can be such a financial hurdle to get the tools to help you with your mental health. And I believe strongly, and I know 100% certain that mental health is just as important as your heart health. We have to be a whole person in order to work best. And so I have reached out to several people. This is all happening. I was given the green light to announce this. So how will the space between podcasts be used in this? Well, some of the guests that have already been on the show will come back on the show, but in a different setting. It won't be on the podcast. It'll be in a room with cameras and lights and someone telling you that your face is shiny or whatever. And they'll kind of do like the talking head scenario where they're going to talk their story through. So it will be my mission to look through my past documentation and through my future documentation of this podcast. And I don't even, the process of elimination for this is going to be absolutely criminal. But what a great I don't even know what to say right now. This is all just been really, really amazing. And, this beautiful thing has come out of something that, if given a different setting at a different moment, I wouldn't even be here to have accomplished. So I'm glad that something so horrible turned into something so beautiful. And I hope that it continues to do that, because I believe that goodness and kindness, it's just an energy that keeps going. And so that is my big announcement. So the Space Between podcast is now in the works, making a documentary about the correlation between music therapy and mental health. And we'll be using some of our past and future podcast guests to appear in the documentary. We'll also have specialists, doctors, nurses, police officers, firefighters, on the documentary to talk about mental health and how it affects their day-to-day life. It's just, how do we provide people with tools like music? How can we make an announcement even louder? There's never been a better time. There's never been a better time. And while, again, I want to say that music doesn't heal, it is a tool to be used in healing. And so, guys, I am so excited to make this announcement. Of course, more announcements to come. If you are interested in being in a future episode of the Space Between podcast, please send me a DM through Facebook, Instagram, whatever. I promise you I am the slowest to respond, and I hate that about myself. But again, this is a show of one. I'm doing it by myself, all by myself. So it's crazy. I got 4 kids and I'm trying to juggle over here and find a job. And I'm like, what's happening? So it is happening. But if you'd love to be on the show, I'd love for you to be on. Again, there's no prerequisites. Just say, hey, I'd love to be on the show. And we'll get you down. We'll schedule you. I am ready to record. I took about a month off just to kind of, redecorate my house and do some crazy things. Do some crazy things. So I'm excited to be back in the saddle again, and I look forward to recording your journey with the Dave Matthews Band. So guys, thank you so much for the past little over 2 years. Thank you for allowing me to just use this podcast as a trampoline to a different platform where hopefully we can help save some more lives. So guys, until the next one, and guys, the next episode is going to have someone else on it besides me. So guys, until the next time, peace, love, and Dave Matthews Band.